We welcome you back to Franklin Pierce Global at Franklin Pierce University in Rindge, New Hampshire. In day two of the Democratic National Convention, where a whole bunch of candidates are speaking tonight and a lot more, kind of a murderer's row, if you will, of Democratic candidates. And one of the people who's been on top of it all in terms of politics for so many years, a Franklin Pierce alum. He's been the editor-in-chief of the New Hampshire Union Leader, has been a reporter at Politico. Now he's the editor-in-chief of the American Psychological Association. Want to welcome Trent Spiner on air here on Radio Row at Franklin Pierce. Trent, great to have you here.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me.
So Trent, what have you noticed so far in 2020 compared to 2016 when, Donald Trump was running and he was kind of on the offensive compared to, running against Hillary Clinton with that, anti-establishment rhetoric? He's trailing in the polls. Obviously, coronavirus has been part of that, but we've kind of seen a different side of what President Trump has been going after, this whole culture war thing, that sort of thing. Do you see that being a help to him, a hindrance to him in terms of getting back into the race with Biden?
Oh boy, I think that anyone who has a good sense, and anyone who tries to say what helps or hurts President Trump, it's just a guess. It's a best guess, right? I mean, think back to this time in the 2015, 2016 time period, right? I mean, everyone you talk to was saying Hillary Clinton's going to win. Hillary Clinton's going to win. There's no way Donald Trump can win. And that's not what happened. And I think that folks inside the Beltway just completely missed the pulse of what was happening in America. And I think that if you look at what we're seeing now, even with Biden in the lead in polls, these polls are just so unreliable at this point. No offense to pollsters, but it's impossible to tell what's going to work and what's not going to work. And the other thing is, we're 80-something days out here, and every day something is changing. Something wild is happening, something we didn't think was ever going to happen before. So there's a long way to go here.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. One of the main topics that you're covering is the voters that the Clinton campaign missed. The people that didn't come out and vote, or the voters that voted for Trump because they felt their voices were unheard by the Clinton campaign. How do you think Joe Biden or the Democratic Party can win those voters back or get out the vote in a time like coronavirus?
Well, it's interesting to hear former First Lady Michelle Obama talking about that yesterday, where she was saying she did some math for people. It's always hard to do math on TV, right? Because you kind of lose people. But there was this one stat that she used where she was talking about how if you averaged out the votes in certain polling places, that it averaged out to about 2 votes. Had they just gotten 2 more votes in each precinct, Hillary Clinton would be president right now. And that was an important number, I think, that they were talking about. That this idea that every vote matters, that certainly happened in 2016, right? I mean, there were people who saw the polls and said, I don't need to vote. I don't love Hillary Clinton, but she's going to win, so I don't need to go vote. So that's what happened then. Now, here's something that I think is happening now, something that I've been seeing, and it's been going on all year. And this is right here, I think this is what's going to decide the election. How many people who were Bernie Sanders supporters, who are Bernie Sanders supporters, how many of those people are going to come out and vote for Joe Biden? That's going to make the difference here. I think that President Trump has a base. That's the number of people he's going to get to vote for him. I wouldn't be surprised in terms of the general election numbers if he had about the same number of votes that he did in the 2016 cycle. It wouldn't be surprising. The difference, I think, is whether or not Bernie Sanders voters are going to show up for Joe Biden. And that's what, in my opinion, that's what most of yesterday was, right? That's why you had Bernie Sanders on day one of the convention. That's why you had Michelle Obama talking about that 2-vote per precinct difference. I mean, I think that is a clear sign that the Biden campaign, that was their day one. That was what they were talking about. And I think that's a clear indication of what they're worried about.
I think it's very fair to argue that there needs to be more, like if they can get those people that wouldn't have voted or would have voted for Bernie and now don't know what to do, if they can get those people out, it's important. I also, going back to Paul's initial comment about 2016, I think it's important to remember in 2016, myself, Katie, I don't know about Paul, but none of us could vote, and now we can. You have a whole new, fresh group of voters who are now very politically aware because of the Black Lives Matter movement, because of how the coronavirus and everything going on that's affecting literally every potential voter and their families. I think that'll draw out a lot more people, and they're trying to really feed off of that. Like you're saying, with getting those Bernie supporters and those middle floaters out there to go and vote.
Let me ask you, can I ask all of you a question?
Absolutely.
Can you tell me what's the sense among students? What's the sense among first-time voters, people who grew up in the Trump era, about where how you're going to vote, how your friends are going to vote? What's your sense on how young people who are voting for the first time, where they're going to split?
First, I think that a lot of young people have tended to go Senator Sanders. I think that there's no doubt about that. In 2016, that was the case. In 2020, it was the case. And a lot of my friends, who couldn't vote in 2016, they've become infuriated again. They've said, well, the establishment has taken it away from Sanders again. They didn't give AOC a seat at the table, that sort of thing. That it's a lot of them are going to either sit it out again or even vote third party. And that's the big concern you're talking about there, Trent, that if a lot of those Sanders voters don't show up, and that's it, you continue to lose that turnout that allowed Trump to eke out that close win back in 2016, Katie.
Yeah, I think younger voters are focused on different topics, different issues than voters in the past. For example, we want a candidate that's going to focus on climate change. We want a candidate that's going to focus on LGBTQ rights. We want a candidate that's going to focus on stopping the injustices against Black people that have been here and have never gone away. Our generation wants this gone in politics, and I think they see that their views are aligning more with the progressive Democrats, and that's where their votes are aligning.
Yeah, so like what Katie's saying is, people, from what I'm hearing, people want a candidate who are looking to their future. Like, we're young, we want someone that's going to help us be a better nation for 50 years, not just the next 4 or 8. We want someone that's going to help us and our parents, us and our younger siblings. And so what I'm hearing from like my friends and the people around me is they're like, why should I even bother voting? It's not going to do anything for me. A tax break for anyone's barely going to help me. Anything, like all of these big issues like healthcare. I'm still on healthcare for what, the next 8 years? It doesn't matter to me. And that's what they're all saying. It's just, it doesn't matter to me. Why should I bother?
Yeah, and I think older generations are looking at us as like, we just want free education, or we just want our loans to be forgiven. But I think what the younger generation, this election especially, is really focused on is human rights.
Like getting that free education for everyone, not just white middle class people. We want a free education for the people who need it most, the people that are coming from public schools in poor areas that are not at the equity of their peers.
Yeah, and Trent, I have a question for you.
Great, bring it on.
As part of the media, I'm sure everyone has heard about this attack on media and the bias in media, which is now being called, quote, fake media. How do you think the idea of fake news is affecting this 2020 election? And how, as student journalists, can we get rid of this negative connotation of fake media.
All right, we're going to work on getting Trent Spiner back in just a moment. So,
I stumped him.
Yeah, you did. You definitely did. He must have gotten stumped. But, it's a great point. I think he brought up a couple great points, is that it is about the Sanders supporters turning out. A lot of them, we're talking about, a lot of it was Trump riled up a base, and he got what he needed to do done in terms of that. But at the same time, he also, he relied a lot on Hillary Clinton not bringing out the turnout. We've got Trent Spiner back again. So, as again, we lost Trent, we're bringing him back, and so I think we've got Trent Spiner back for the second time. Trent, are you there? All right, we still don't have Trent Spiner.
But I think you're right, Paul. I think that's why this Democratic convention, they focus so much on Bernie Sanders. I mean, he got 8 minutes of speaking time compared to AOC, who got 60 seconds. They know that Bernie Sanders supporters are gonna make a difference in this election.
Yeah, and being aware of that is one of the most important parts. The fact that the Democratic Committee is aware that they need these middle people, they need minorities, they need majorities, they need everyone. They need the young people, they need the old people to win, I think is very clear in their strategies, but they need to make it more concise almost. They're like doing it very broad, vague, trying to pull in people from wherever they can get them. But like I said earlier, they need to get concise, specific people.
Something that Trent had brought up when he was here is that his mentioning that AOC being at the DNC and the fact that she got 60 seconds of speaking time. Bernie Sanders got 8 minutes in his first night, the longest speaking time of anybody in terms of the numbers, in terms of
Paul,
bringing
just like
everything
you're
back.
saying, Bernie got 8 minutes, which is way more than anyone else. So it's really showing the DNC's emphasis on on Bernie rather. And they know they need his voters and the young people. So I feel like they're almost just sort of leeching off of Sanders and his crowd to try to really push them to vote for Biden by having Biden heavily endorse him so much.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we can throw it back to my question and address that a little bit before Trent gets back on. But I think that right now it's really hard for voters to tell what is true and what's false. And I think the reason so many voters are actually tuning into the convention more than ever before is because they don't know what to believe. We get this idea
Twitter. Don't even get started on Twitter. Who knows what's real or fake with that?
Right, and we're stuck in this. The media is biased. The fake news. And young voters can't see what's real and fake.
You need to take a class and get training on this is how to get the good news versus the bad news, and what is bad news, and is all news bad news?
Right.
Is it really what the media is feeding us is what the people believe? It's
right. And I think a lot of support for Trump comes from his voters wanting transparency, and whether people like it or not, Trump says what he feels when he feels it.
And all of his attacks on Hillary over the whole email scandal and this and that, it just shows how Trump supporters and voters are so attached to transparency and fixated on it.
Yeah, with that, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back and hopefully have Trent Spiner back on the line here on Franklin Pierce Global at Franklin Pierce University in the Marlin Fitzwater Center.